In this video, I'll give you some tips for solving the ALEKS problem called setting up the solution to a basic quantitative problem. This problem is going to describe with words some sort of mathematical relationship between a few variables, and it wants you to come up with an equation related to this mathematical relationship and to define the symbols that you use in your equation. The first thing that you need to do for this problem is take these words and turn them into some sort of equation, which is actually pretty tricky. So I'm just going to start by reading through this statement and coming up with an equation that matches this first sentence. So this is saying the electric field strength between the plates of an air capacitor is equal to. So I'm going to get rid of some of this information because I think it's not necessary. The electric field strength is equal to something. Rather than try to use variables, I'm just going to phrase this with words. The electric field strength is equal to the voltage across the plates. I'm just going to say voltage is equal to the voltage. And again, I'm just going to be using words for now, divided by the distance between them. So again, I'm just going to use words. I'm not going to use variables. So I suggest, whatever your scenario is, I suggest that you start by writing this kind of a situation using words rather than using variables. Just write up a mathematical relationship between these different variables. And then the next part of the problem is going to give you a few numbers. We're just going to ignore this information for now. We are going to come back to it. It is important. We're going to keep reading. Down in the last part of the problem, ALEKS is going to identify one of the variables, and it's going to tell you which symbol it wants you to use for that variable. So saying that for me, it wants me to use the letter D to represent distance. So I'm going to go back to this equation that I created, and I'm going to use the letter D to represent distance, which is exactly what ALEKS wants me to do. Now, for the other two terms in my case, or there could be more terms in yours, for the others, ALEKS doesn't care what symbol I use to represent these other variables. It's saying I could use whatever I want, whatever variable I want. Okay, so that's a little bit stressful to me, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to kind of make a note over here on the side of what symbol I'm using for each one of these variables. For voltage, I'm going to define that as capital V. That's pretty logical, V for volts. And then for the electric field strength, because we can only use one letter, for the electric field strength, I'm going to use a capital E. And that's going to be the symbolism that I use. So this is the equation that I have derived from the ALEKS, from the story in the ALEKS problem. So now moving on, this wants me to come up with an equation that I could use to solve for D. So what I'm going to do is take this equation that I created, and I'm just going to do some algebraic manipulation on the equation to isolate the variable D. So I'm going to start by multiplying both sides of the equation by the variable D in order to get it out of the denominator. So that's going to give me D times E equals V. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is divide both sides of the equation by E. And that's going to give me D equals V over E. And this is the equation that I use over here. So keep in mind that I am the one who chose to use V for voltage and E for electric field. You could use whatever variables you want. In the next part of the problem, this is where ALEKS is going to ask you to define your symbols. And this is where we're going to come back to this information right here. So the problem tells us that the voltage, or when we have a voltage of 138 volts, and that is represented down here in this part of the answer box, 138 volts, and it wants me to identify which of these symbols I am going to apply to the value 138 volts. 138 volts is the voltage, and I defined the voltage as capital V. The other number that was given to me in the problem is 4.9 kilovolts per centimeter, and ALEKS says that is the electric field strength. I defined the electric field strength with the symbol capital E, and so I'm going to let ALEKS know that is the symbol that I'm using for the 4.9 kilovolts per centimeter measurement. Now, again, this is a pretty tricky problem. There are a couple of different scenarios in the problem. There are a couple of different types of equations that you're going to have to define. I suggest that you follow this format no matter what the situation is. Take your time, and you can do this problem.